So we're by Rami Bar Chama, which he says 8 lines up, 3 words in, on Nun Beis Amen Beis on 52b. Okay, by Rab Chama, Roiva Atzamais Min Sidra Val Gugoyles Mai. What's the halacha if there's 1/4 of bone of the spine and of the skull, and it's usually when we ask this type of question when we talk about the amounts, it's that it's powder. There's no one part of this bone, wasn't no shard or fragment that is large. What's the halacha concerning a nazir? Now, kikatani chatzi kavat samais. The halacha is in the Mishnah. It's cited that in order for a nazir to be considered tamei or rather have the requirement to shave his head and stop his naziris, the Mishnah said chatzi kav atsamais. You need half a kav. Now we're talking about 1/4 of a kav, which is less. That's only from the other bones, from other limbs and other bones. But from the spine and the skull, the chamiri, which is more stringent, and the basic understanding is that they're naturally larger. Even 1/4 of a kav of this measurement of finer powder is going to be considered. I just realized something. Okay. Even this amount of 1/4 of the kav might be a problem. Okay, we are on. I see the cut is destroying. Good morning, everyone. We are on Nun Beis Amud Beis 52b, towards the bottom, about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lines up, and we're asking if you have a 1/4 of a kav of this measurement of more of like powdered, fragmented bones. If it's only 1/4, what is the halacha? Usually, the Mishnah said it has to be half, but the Gemara explained maybe that's only regular bones, but the spine and the skull, which is vastly more important or larger, depending, that is going to maybe that's only 1/4. That's Gemara's thought to make it an issue. First 4 lines up. First line, no, there's no difference. No difference between the skull. There's no difference between the spine. In both cases, it's going to be a problem, and it's only 1/5. It's only a half. But 1/4, that's a special case when it comes. We'll talk about when 1/4 applies. When the Mishnah said a kav, it's a half a kav across the board, no matter what. So we're going to give a few answers. So the first answer, Amar Rava, Tashma. Come in here the following brisa. Hashidra al gulgoyles. It says the shidra and the gulgoyles is a half a kav. It says the spine and the skull. Then if it's true that unlike the other bones, the skull and the spine require more. It's even less. It's 1/4 and not only a half, like the Mishnah states. Then it should have said, "Listening al roiva atzam is habam in a shidra." It should say clearly 1/4, because in the Mishnah it said half a kav from all the bones, and it also said and the spine and the skull. Now, if it already specifically said skull and spine, and the skull and spine is more, it's a half. It's less. It's a 1/4. Then it should have clearly stated it. But the fact that it just left it just based on what I said before it was a half and not a 1/4, therefore that's halacha. We're coming out that even the skull and the bone, when it comes to more fragmented or powdered bones, the halacha is going to be it is a half and not 1/4. Okay, now we go to the top of Nun Gimel Amud Aleph. We're on the top of 53a. Now we have a question. Maybe that which Rava said, but Rava himself needs it for. He said, elsewhere he says, no, the skull and the spine that does not contain 1/4 of a kav. That's when that's when you're not tamei. But if it's a quarter of kab, we could infer from there that it is tamei. So Rava is trying to say at first that half a kab is only a half a kab that causes the nazir to have to shave his head. But it seems elsewhere he says it's even a 1/4, or at least he says less than 1/4. I'm assuming more than 1/4 will be a problem. So on that basa the shama me Rabbi Kiva, you're right. At one point, he did hold that 1/4 of a kab will be a problem, and it will mitame a nazir and require him to go ahead and actually shave his head. However, once that was before he learned it properly, once he learned it from Akiva, he changed his mind and he understood halacha is like based on the Mishnah, it's half a kab measurement, not 1/4. Okay, so that's one answer. Now, Tashma, Shammai Amar Etzem Echa Min Shidra Min Gilgailas. According to Shammai, he holds that even one bone, whether it's a one bone from the spine or from the skull. So, according to Shammai, that the issue is like this: that is Beis Shammai, but who's arguing on him? So we have the Rabbanan that's going to hold that they hold that no, you need to have a bone. You need a bone that comes that either you need the complete complete spinal cord or the spine, or you need the skull. So whatever the case is, we do want to say like this: is that the Beis Shammai holds even a little bit. The rabbis argue on him, and they come out. They are going to be a little more stringent than him, but at least they will hold 1/4. They're going to hold that you need 1/4. So we're bringing a similar like a proof that which answering our question. Our original question was: is a spine in a skull? Is it 1/4 or is it half? We just brought a proof based from Beis Shammai. We could infer from Beis Shammai what the Rabbanan hold, and we can see from here the Rabbanan hold 1/4. So Shani Shammai the Machmer Tfei. No, that's not going to be an answer. Beis Shammai is extremely stringent. Doesn't mean just because he says that the most littlest amount is going to cause an issue with the skull and the spine. You can infer from there that he holds it's a little bit. So it must be the rabbis who argue with him are a little bit more. That's going to be that's going to be 1/4, which is sort of the smallest measurement after that. So no, Beis Shammai is extremely stringent. They hold even the smallest amount. The rabbis who argue on him, they hold it's a half. You can't learn just based on what Beis Shammai says, what his opposing view is. Now, time of the Shammai, the Machmire. Let us learn from here that the reason for Beis Shammai is because he's extremely stringent. We can learn from here that according to the Rabbanan, they say you need both the skull and the spine. It must be that the regulacha is half. So maybe you're right. Let's learn from here that you're right. If you can't learn that it's a 1/4, let's learn from the rabbis who oppose Beis Shammai that it's going to be a half, and that would be the other. That would answer the other side where we said is it a 1/4 or a half? So let's utilize it. Answer that's only a half, or it's only a half, which is less than the regular man. Maybe this argument between Shammai and this argument between Beis Shammai and the rabbis are only on one bone. No, maybe there's only on one bone, but maybe when it comes to 1/4 of a kab, both Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel would agree that it's going to cause the nazir to have to go ahead and shave his head. The point is, at the end of the day, we want to bring a proof from Beis Shammai, based on Beis Shammai what the rabbis hold. We don't know. We have no idea what the rabbis hold, just based on the words of Beis Shammai. So we don't have an answer from Beis Shammai. But happens to be we still have Rava. Rava seems to agree that based on the way he was medayik, the way the Mishnah is written, the Mishnah says half a kab and doesn't differentiate whether that's for regular bones or for a skull or the head or the skull or the spine. Sorry. And therefore, in that case, we still hold that regular tumah is metame. The size of a regular tumah is if there's no one fragment larger than a piece of barley, just as powdered. In that case, it's going to be 1/4 for regular tumah by touching, or a tent or a covering over it. But when it comes to the nazir, it's a special halacha. It's going to be half a kab. Only half a kab will cause the nazir to have to go shave his head. I see someone just joined. We are on 53A, and we are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 lines down. Third one line, Amar Rav Laza. Now, Amar Rabbi Lazar, the original rabbis, some of them said chatzi kav atzamais, that half a kav of atzamais, the chatzi lugdam lakol. That this is not like what we seem to be learning, like that they held that across the board, whether for it's regular tuma of touching a dead body, or a dead body has a roof over it and that's causing the tuma to spread all over. Whether it's for a nazir, it's always half a kav of fragmented bones that doesn't have the size of one of the fragments are not the size of a barley. In that case, it's going to be tam across the board. Roivat samais v'vriyistam. Sorry, I'm not yeah. Chatzi chav chatzi look down lakol. Roivat samais, but if it's 1/4 of atsamais, v'reviyistam, and in this case it's a revius 1/4 of a lug of blood. Loy lakol doesn't affect anyone. So across the board, it's going to be half a kav, and across the board of bone, and across the board, it's going to be half a lug of blood, which is a volume, and then a volume measurement. Then loy lakol, it's not going to be metame anything which is unlike which doesn't seem like to be like we learned till now. That's one opinion. Some argued, the other bit argued. They'll know whether for a regular person to be mitame. When we say regular person mitame, will mean that if I touch it, I can't go to the base of mikdash. I can't eat, let's say, kachim. The kohen can't do the avodah. That's what we mean. And for the nazir, we understand the nazir for whatever the reason is. We'll see later on. Well, there's no specific reason. We'll see later on because it's a direct commandment from Sinai. That's going to be 1/4. But with these miksasim, these rabbis they hold no, whether it's for a regular case of tuma, whether it's for a nazir, it's 1/4. I see someone destroying. We are on 53a, and we are about halfway down. First word on the line is going to be revius dam lakol, and then bezdin shalachreim. So okay, so now we have so just to recap, now we're going back to different opinions of how much blood and how much powdered bones will be mitame a regular case for a kohen, for a person not to go into the base of mikdash, and how much it's going to be for a nazir. So one opinion was across the board it's half a kav, and another opinion across the board that was 1/4 of a kav. But bezdin shalachreim, the bezdin that followed these two opinions, amr chatzi kav atzamis v'chatzi lug dam lakol. It's half a kav of atzamis, and it's going to be half a lug of blood for everyone. But roiva atzamis, the vrias dam, but when is it more stringent? When it's only 1/4 of powdered bones, or 1/4 of dam, the truma. If for a kohen, right, only a kohen ki truma, a kohen to eat truma. If he by mistake picks up, carries, touches, or goes into a house that has 1/4 kav. Did I remember how much 1/4 of kav is? I have no idea. It's not so much. Anyway, okay. So if he touches it, then he can't eat truma. If kachim, if Yisrael brings a shlamim, he cannot now go eat it. Avoloy nazir, but however, not now. Where the leniencies come is for a nazir. A nazir is not 1/4; it's a half a kav, and also oisa pesach, which is brought in our Mishnah, I believe. We mentioned it to Mishnah. If one wants to bring a carbon pesach, or more lenient, we let him bring it. If it's only if he picked up, carried, was in a house of a 1/4 of a kav, then he's permitted to bring the carbon pesach. If it's a half a kav, that's when we say no. Wait till pesach sheni. Okay, now 3 different opinions. Well, the first opinion is across the board; it's 1/4. The other opinion is across the board; it's going to be a half. Now, the third opinion, it depends. For most things, it's going to be 1/4, but for a nazir and for the carbon pesach, it's going to be a half. Now, michti. Now, why is it that it seems our Mishnah went with it seems like overall the Gemara goes with the third opinion, that across the board, usually it's going to be 1/4, but for Nazir and Carbon Pesach, it's going to be a half. Why is that? We want to say, like, why is the third opinion better than the other opinions? So we say, Rabbi Kiva bar Idi mipi Shmua amru bichaga zacharu malache. The reason is halacha meishim, and we heard from the prophets, one of the last prophets that we ever had, was Chag Zacharu Malache. They held that it was transmitted to them through the generations from Sinai, Halacha Ma'ishim Sinai, a Nazir, and I guess the Karban Pesach as well. It's only going to be mitame, it's only become tummy and impure at a half a kav and half a lug, and not 1/4. Okay, we're up to the 2 dots on the bottom of 53a. We said al-elu han-nazir magleach, and then now the Mishnah goes through and says, and on these the Nazir has to shave his head, and it goes through all the things that he's metame and everything else that happens, and then at the end it says also al-elu. It says it twice. And the Gemara's going to ask why. Now the Gemara says al-elu drish l'mi'utei. What is on these? What's al-elu is also extra to begin with. What does Mishnah have to say on these? What's it coming to exclude? Esem kisa'ira, that the halacha is that if you have a bone the size of a barley, the al-magoy v'al-masai it's true if you touch it or if you carry it, which is a prime example of tuma, that is going to be a problem and it's going to make you tameh. But if one goes ahead, but in this size, if in an oil, meaning it's in a house and there's a roof on top of it, the idea is that the tumah spreads throughout the house, that is not going to apply. Then val elu de seifa, what's val elu at the seifa doing? Why do we need that? That we say that in this case is that's come to the same case, but it's that what happens if you have a house and there's a little bit of an overhang on the house? Is that included? But it's beyond the walls. Is that included in the oil? On that we say it is also included. That's why it says 2 elus. One is to say oil, the regular overhead, and was also to include an overhang. Okay, we're on the bottom of 52. We're on the bottom of 53a. Again, the Mishnah mentioned that I will take a half a kava vatzamis of bones, half a powder of bones, for it to be a problem and for a Nazir to have to go ahead and shave his head. Okay, so now we turn to Nun Gimel Amud Beis. We turn to 53b.
For a regular person, it needs to be
a quarter
of it
to cause problems, right?
problem. So that seems
But for a Nazir
another.
is going to be a half. Okay, so now we're sort of continuing. It's a little funny because we already went through this, and now we're going through it again. So again, we're on the top of 53b. The Mishnah said v'chatzi kav atzamis. The Mishnah clearly says that half a cup of bones, that is going to be a problem. Now we say chatzi kav atzamis in, right? Atzamis light. Very simple. It clearly says half, so obviously it's coming to exclude everything below half, which would be a quarter. So hechidami, how does this work? If you come and tell me that in this pile of crushed bones, there's a fragment the size of a barley. The reason why your tummy is not because you have a quarter, you have a half, and as to exclude a quarter, right? It's not because you have a half size of crushed bones. Because the reason is because it's a saira. There's the size in there that's going to be a problem in itself. Nothing to do with the crushed bones. You could have a house full of crushed bones. Maybe it's not a problem until there's an actual fragment of a saira, of a barley. The answer is the no, you're right. The issue with the half is that it's crushed, and it says into a kemach, into flour. It's finely crushed bones. In that case, it's going to be even if there isn't any fragment the size of a barley, still it's going to be a problem in itself, but it has to reach half a kav. Now, the Gemara continues, al aver min ames. That is going back on the Mishnah. So I'm just going to quote. That's quoting the Mishnah. Al aver min ames, al aver min achai sheish alein basar kro. So they were talking about that if the Nazir comes in contact with a limb from a dead body or a limb from a live body, meaning unfortunately it was ripped off while he was alive, sheish alein basar kro, that has enough flesh that it will regenerate, it will regrow. Okay, I don't know what the shear is. I'm not sure if everyone went into that in the Mishnah, but whatever that is, there's enough flesh on the limb that it will, if it would have been attached to the body, it would regrow regenerate by itself. Okay. Now on this we could say, in alayin basakro mai, what happens if you have the same case? You have a limb from a chai, from the live, or from mace, from the dead, but there's not enough basar. There's not enough flesh on there to regenerate, whatever that shear is. I don't know exactly what it is. But the Mishnah clearly says it needs to have it to regenerate. Our question is, what if it can't? Doesn't have enough to regenerate? Rabbi Yechon's source states the obvious. Well, if the Mishnah says you need to have it, then obviously we can infer from there. If you don't have that amount, then of course the Nazir does not shave his head on it, and it won't affect the Nazir. That's Rabbi Yechon. So Rabbi Shlakish Amar, Nazir Meglei Chalen. Shlakish says no. The Nazir does have to go ahead and shave on it. Now, Rabbi Yechon Amar, Ein a Nazir Meglei Chalen, the Haikatani Bereisha. The reason a Nazir does not have to go ahead and shave on it, because it says in the Reisha of the Mishnah, it says in the beginning of the Mishnah, that on it is on condition that these limbs have the amount of flesh to regenerate. Again, this is I jumped the gun. He's just explaining himself. Obviously, according to Rabbi Yechanan, the Mishnah clearly states, if you have from a limb, it needs to have, it will cause problems for Nazir on condition that there's flesh on there and there's enough flesh to regenerate. We confer from there very simply that if it doesn't have that amount, then obviously it's going to be not a problem. That's Rabbi Yechanan. But what Reb Shimon, what's Reb Shlakish? Reb Shimon Lakish Amar, no. The reason why Reb Shlakish says that if there's not that amount on it, it still will cause a problem for the Nazir, because it did not state that in the Seifa. If you look back at the Mishnah, I think the Mishnah, it was on Mem, was 49b, I think. It was on Mem Tes, or Mem Chel, maybe it's 48b, whatever. You go look over there, it says, it recaps it at the end. It says in the Seifa, I believe it recaps everything and it skips it it does not mention the safe. So in the beginning of the Mishnah, it said on an aver, on a limb that let me go look at the Mishnah, I believe. Yeah, it was it's the Mishnah is Chaptes, Mem Tes Amid Beis 49b, and it says Al Elu Tumas HaNazir, and it goes through all of them. And the first one is at some point it says Al Aver Ben Achai Sheisel Basakro. It says a limb from the chai, a limb from the mace that I'm just quoting the Mishnah over here, back by the Mishnah, that has enough flesh on it to regenerate. Then if you go towards the end of the Mishnah, it says Al Elu, Al Tamid Nazir, hold on. Al Aver Min Ames, Val Min Chai Sheisel Grow, Al Chatzi Kavatzamis, Val Chatzi Dam Val. Right. It says again, Al Elu Nazir Megaleach. Hold on. What's the Sefer here? The Sefer, the next Mishnah. Give me a minute. Yeah, my bad. The next Mishnah is 54a. That makes sense. Okay, the usual times, all right. So we're between two Mishnahs. On 54a, it mentions what you don't shave on. On 49, it mentions what you do shave on. Now, it does mention on 49, Nazir will have to shave if he touches aver, a limb that has enough flesh on it to regenerate. Now we can Rabbi Yechon first from there. If there's not enough, then obviously he's not going to have to shave if he comes in contact with it. But on 44 later on Mem Dalid, it brings down all the cases again. But in this case, these are the following that don't cause a problem. But it doesn't mention that if it comes in contact with the limb that does not have enough flesh to regenerate. Doesn't mention that. So must be, so Reb Shlakish is looking later on and saying, well, it doesn't mention that over there. Must be that if you can infer from that Mishnah, just as much as you infer from the first Mishnah. So I'm going from the later Mishnah. Later Mishnah says, does not mention that a Nazir does not have to shave his head if he comes in contact with a limb that does not have enough flesh to regenerate. Must be, if he comes in contact with a limb that does not have enough flesh to regenerate, it will cause a problem. That's Reb Shlakish. So Rabbi Yechon is going from before, and Rabbi Yechon is focused on later on. Now, Rabbi Yechon, what's Rabbi Yechon going to do? Because it's a good point. Now, Rabbi Shlakish also now has a good point, right? Because Rabbi Shlakish says later on, look at it, it points to my point of view. So Rabbi Yechon is going to answer no. Later on Mem Dalet on 54, that is going through Nun Dalet, not Mem Dalet, Nun Dalet. Later on in Nun Dalet, when it's going through the cases, the one that a Nazir does not have to go ahead and shave his head if he comes in contact with. Those are the cases which was not so clear in the first Mishnah. Whatever was ambiguous or not clear or it's questionable and it wasn't clear in the first Mishnah, that's what it's going to go ahead and answer. But the Mishnah was very clear in the first Mishnah, right? It's clearly said, only if there's enough flesh to regenerate. If there's not enough flesh to regenerate, then it's not going to come tummy. He's not going to have to shave his head. Therefore, there's absolutely no reason to repeat it again in their seifa. That's his answer. So again, Rosh Lakish is inferring it from later on, from on Nun Dalid, on 54. And Rabbi Yechon says, no, that Mishnah is only for those cases which were not clear and clear cut from the first Mishnah. And Rabbi Yechon is pretty right. It's pretty clear cut from the Mishnah that if it's not enough flesh to regenerate, it won't be a problem. But we continue. But if that's true, we have a problem. Because in the Seifa later on, if you look at Nun Dalid, it says, one of the cases it says that it won't cause a problem is if there's 1/4 of a kav of bones. Now, I don't understand. In our Mishnah on Nun Tes, on Mem Tes, on 49, it clearly states you need half a kav in order to be a problem. In fact, that was the first part. If you look on the top of our Gemara, on the top line of 53b, it clearly says half a kav is a problem. We can infer from there a quarter is not a problem. So if it's so clear cut, why does the Mishnah on 54 go ahead and have to mention it? So if Rabbi Yechon is claiming that whatever's clear cut is not mentioned later on, well, half a kav is clear cut, and later on it mentions that at 1/4 of a kav, it does not cause a problem. So therefore, Rabbi Yechon just lost his reasoning, right? Okay. That's our Shlaksh's question back on Rabbi Yechon. So I answered Hassam later on. There's a specific reason that we have to mention 1/4 of powdered bones will not be a problem, because there is a reason why I would think it's not so clear cut. There are cases when I think it would be a problem. Now I'll even ask you right now before I explain this. It's like when I said 1/4 is not a problem, was that across the board, whether you touch it, whether you carry it, or even if you're in an aisle, even if there's a canopy on top of it? Well, if you think of, the Gemara never differentiated between all three cases, but it's not so true, because that even if you touch it, when it comes to Nazir, just to confuse us even more, when it comes to a Nazir, if he comes in contact by touching or carrying 1/4, it will be a problem. When do we say a half? That's only if it's under a roof. Let's go look back at the Gemara. Hassam, I went back a line. Hassam ilav roivat samayis. If the Mishnah later on Nun Dal did not mention 1/4, havamina afil amagala masai. I would think even if I carry, or even if I touch 1/4 of a kav of powdered bones, it won't be a problem, and the Nazir will not have to be megaleach, won't have to go ahead and shave. That's also true. It's not true. If he touches 1/4, it will be a problem. It's only on oil. It's only in a case when you have 1/4 of a kav in a room with a roof, and the Nazir's in it with it, without touching it, without it coming in contact with it. But since the tumah spreads all over, it'll be a problem only by half the kav. But if he carries it, or if he touches it, that's even by a quarter. That's why the Mishnah later on, that's why Berachim says, that's why when it comes to 1/4 and a quarter, it has to be clearly, later on, it clearly has to say 1/4 is only not a problem by oil, but 1/4 will be a problem by touching or carrying. But back to our case of atzamais that have enough flesh to regenerate, you have, not atzamais, aver, limbs that have enough to regenerate. In that case, it's clear cut. It's still according to Rabbi Yechon is clear cut. The Mishnah, our first Mishnah said that it's only if there's enough flesh to regenerate, and not anything less than that. That's Rabbi Yechon's opinion. But we tried to continue. I have a chatzilag dam, a half a lug of dam. The shamta minei chatzilug dam in revius dam loy. That in our Mishnah on before in the Reisha, which would be on 49, which is on Mem Tes, it clearly says a quarter of a lug. Now we can figure out a quarter of a lug, yes. Sorry, half a lug, yes. A quarter of a lug, no. Hold on, it was half, right? Chatzi. Why does it mention later on a quarter of a lug is not a problem? Why isn't that clear cut? The Mishnah says later. The Mishnah on Mem Dalet on 54 clearly states a quarter of a lug of dam is not a problem. But couldn't we infer that? Is that not clear cut from the Mishnah before on Nun Tes, Mem Tes? So Hassam, you're right, but still we have to learn something out. Something's not so clear when it comes to half a quart of lug of dam that it does not cause a problem. Because you might learn Rabbi Kiva. Rabbi Kiva reviews dam haba mishnei mesim v'tam ba'oil. Not so simple. Rabbi Kiva holds that if you have a revius dam that comes from two separate bodies, perhaps it will create an oil. Therefore, whatever the reason is, the Mishnah later on does have to mention a quarter lug of dam, of blood, does not cause a problem because it's coming to exclude an opinion. Therefore, even though it's said in our Mishnah half, and we can infer from there half yes, quarter no, and why is it mentioned later on? It has to be mentioned later on to exclude a different opinion. But we still Rabbi Yechon still left with his answer that the first Mishnah before in the Reisha mentioned a half. That's to exclude a fourth, and therefore it doesn't. And therefore it's not mentioned later on, and therefore that's why it's not mentioned later on. Not because later on it doesn't mention a quarter to exclude a half. Because that's clear cut. Our Mishnah says a half to exclude a quarter. That is Rabbi Yechon. So we still have to figure out Rabbi Shlokish. Shlokish says that it is mentioned later on. The question is why. Okay. Now, Hi Aver Min HaMeis. Now, okay, we're continuing. Hi Aver Min HaMeis. Hey Chidami. That Aver Min HaMeis, that does not have enough on it to degenerate. In West case, it is by etzem kisayra. My time is Rabbi Yechon. Now we're still trying to figure out exactly what the case is. Now we're still trying to with excluding based on the cases. So this case in our Mishnah said that if you have a limb, and on limb is enough flesh to regenerate, it will cause a problem. Is that what's the case? Do we say that this in my time Rabbi Yechon, if on this limb there's a bone larger than a barley, then of course it's mitame. Why? Even if there is not enough flesh to regenerate, but you got the bone to cause problems, why would Rabbi Yechon say that it's going to be tame? Sorry, it's not going to be tame because there's a sayra on it. There's a bone the size of barley. Let's be etzem kisayra. If you don't have a bone the size of a sayra of a barley, my time Dar Shlokish. What's your Shlokish? There's not enough on it. It doesn't have enough of the bone. Plus, it doesn't regenerate. So that's basically our question is more on Rish Lakish. Because on Rabbi Yechon, he could clearly just say, "You're right. That doesn't have esem kisa'ira, but it doesn't have esem kisa'ira. It doesn't have a bone the size of a barley. Plus, it doesn't have flesh to regenerate. Therefore, of course, it's not metame, and it's true. But what about Rish Lakish? Rish Lakish that says that even if there is not enough flesh to regenerate, then why is it mitame? Now, if it's because there's a sa'ir on it, then of course it's mitame. So what's Shlakish going to say? So we still have a question of Shlakish. What's the reason Shlakish holds that there is not enough flesh to regenerate? It will still cause a problem for a Nazir. We want to say because since it's excluded from the later Mishnah, that must have since it's mentioned in the later Mishnah. Hold on. The reason for Shlakish was, let me go back for a second. Because it wasn't mentioned in the Seifa. Since it's not mentioned in the Seifa, must be that it does cause a problem. And that's his answer. Now, so Rav Shlakish is saying really, of course, that on the limb, you don't have the bone the size of a barley, because that itself would cause a problem. So if you love Rachmana Ravi, but still here, the Torah included a limb which does not have on it any large size bone, with not enough flesh to regenerate, it still will cause a problem. The Tanya, and we're going to go through a long brisa. It's going to break up psukim, and we're going to have to come on the other side, and it'll give us the answer. The Tanya, so this is the pasuk. The pasuk states anything which he touches the field, bichlal cherev. So with a sword, that it touches a limb with a sword, or if it goes ahead or if it touches a dead body, right? So and whoever touches in the open field the body of someone who got killed by a sword or just a corpse. Now, let's break this up. Al panei hasadeh, zeh hamahol al panei hamis. What's panei hasadeh mean? This means that there was a canopy on top of the corpse. Bichlal. Now, next we try to figure out what does bichlal mean. So we say on this the zeh ivra min achai. This is if there is a limb from a cut off from a live person. And also there's enough on it to regenerate. Now, just to point out, this I think we're talking about touching, not an oil. This is if you touch it. Now, if you touch it, even if there's not enough, that with an oil, and there is only enough to regenerate. We'll get back to this. Say a sword, that is also like just a corpse, the sword itself. Or the dead bodies. This is talking about a limb that was cut off from the body. Adam, or with the bones of a person. This we say is 1/4 of a kav. This is a closed, a sealed grave. We turn to the top of Nundalam and Beis, Nundalam Alf, sorry. We're on top of 54a, and we're still going through the psukim. Hold on, it's still in the Brisa. The Amar Thomas by Kas for Oilis by Kas for Yoredas. Okay, this is a famous story. Right, this is famous. What we mean says that if you have a body in a sealed grave, the tumah goes all the way up and it goes all the way down. Now, what about touching? Because until now we were talking about oil. So it seems to be saying that if there's a limb that they cannot regenerate, and only if it does regenerate, then it will cause a problem with oil. What about touching? So Amar Rav Yehuda Tanya. Now we continue. Be'etzem is that etzem kisayra. When it comes to a oil, it's on condition they have a bone the size of a barley. This is when it comes to touching. This is talking about a limb from a body, but that was cut off from a live body. And there's not enough on it to regenerate. Again, this is the same case, or a dead body. This is an aver which came off from a dead body, and there's not enough flesh to regenerate. Okay, this is interesting. What does kaver mean? In this case, it's the grave. This is the grave before the commandments. This is sort of saying that before the Jews accepted the Torah, the whole idea of oil of a canopy didn't apply. So you could say nowadays it doesn't apply to non-Jews as well. But the point is, so again, the point we want to focus on is that when it comes to an oil, when it comes to canopy, you seems to be saying you do need the amount, you do need enough flesh to regenerate. When it comes to touching, you don't need the amount flesh enough to regenerate in order to cause a problem. Now, that one we said, that's what we're focusing on, right? According to this Eva Minames, this case of a limb from a body, what's the case? If we have a bone the size of the barley, we already spoke about touching. So must be, we're talking about a limb that does not have on it enough bone. It does not have on it the bone the size of a barley. And in this case, the Torah included it. So after this whole long brisa that we broke down the psukim, the point is as follows: we're trying to find for Rav Shlokish. We're trying to find for Rav Shlokish a case, meaning what we want to find. How does Shlokish know that if you have when you have a limb that does not have on it the amount of bone the size of a barley, plus there's not enough flesh to regenerate, how do we know that it's going to cause the Nazir to have to go ahead and shave his head? And on that we say, because based on the psukim, the psukim clearly said that when it comes to touching it, even though if you touch a limb that does not have enough to regenerate, it will cause a problem by touching. Maybe we're talking about a limb that has enough, the reason why it's a problem is because there's a bone the size of a barley. But the Torah said that separately. The Torah says before that in the psukim, that's specifically if it's the size of a kasayra. If the whole issue of the aver of the limb is because of the sayra that's included in the word etzem, so what's the Torah come to teach us? It must be it's not the size of a sayra, but still the Brisa says we're talking about an aver, a limb, but does not have enough to regenerate. So we see from here the Torah does include a limb that does not have flesh to regenerate, will still be a problem and will be metameh. That's Rabbi Shlokish's proof. Now, what's the Rabbi Yochanan? Rabbi Yochanan said, no, it needs enough to regenerate. The ispe, really, the Gemara, the Brisa talking about when it's enough to regrow. You're right. If you can't apply that to touching, and touching is even if it can't regrow, we must be talking about masa, we must be talking about carrying. And carrying is a case when even the case when you can't go. We're going to go ahead and apply that even to that even though it's true that you can't. We already learned that. That's what I'm saying. Yeah, okay, fine. That we're saying is that really the case is that you're right, you can't regrow. So what's the problem? Is because there's it's the aver, it's a limb the size of a barley. Now there's a bone the size of a barley. If that's true, well, the Torah already said etzem. Etzem includes the bone the size of a barley. So why would it have a limb? The only reason by limb is a problem is because of that there's the size of a barley. Remember, the answer Rabbi Boruch wants to hold that a limb that does not have enough flesh to regenerate does not cause a problem. So what's he going to do with this price? This price clearly states that a limb that does not have the size to regenerate, does not have enough flesh to regenerate, will be a problem when it comes to tummy. So that was obstructionist proof. So Rabbi Boruch is saying no. Really, it's a size. The case is that because the reason that the fact that does not have enough flesh to regenerate is not going to cause a problem. The reason is because this limb happens to have on it enough bone the size of a barley. Now, if that's the case, but the Torah already said etzem. Etzem came to include that should fall under the category of etzem. If the whole reason is because that's etzem, it's the bone the size of a barley, that was included before. And now we say no, we need it twice. One to teach us touching, one to teach us carrying. That's Rabbi Yochanan's reason, and therefore, according to Rabbi Yochanan, still he maintains that if the Nazir touches an aver, a limb that does not have enough flesh on it to regenerate, it won't cause a problem. He won't have to go ahead and shave his head. Okay, we're going to stop here. It's a little early, but we need to leave something for tomorrow.